Welcome back to Tools Part 2. In this video, we are going to talk about the tools on the bottom row. We're going to start by talking about threaders. Threaders are located on the wall in one of the magnet tins. If you're having a lot of trouble and you can't get your thread through the eye of your needle, there is a little tool that we can use for this. So this is called a threader. Basically, the threader is going to pull the thread through the eye of the needle for you using this little loop of wire on the end here. You're going to have to smush it together to try to get it as narrow as possible so that it can fit through the eye of the needle. And then you're going to come from behind, slide it through the eye, and then put your piece of thread through the opening in the threader. Once it's through, you can just gently pull the threader back out of the eye, and it will pull the thread through for you. So you just keep pulling until your string is all the way out. Put it back through the presser foot, and you are good to go. The next tool we're going to talk about are bobbins. Bobbins can be found in this drawer on the shelf above the machine. This is what a pretty standard clear plastic bobbin looks like. Bobbins have two outer plates that hold the thread that should be looped in this middle part and allows you to sew with it. Bobbins are specific to their machines, but there are a couple different types of bobbins that work in this machine. Here are the three of them. This one has a plastic rim, this one is the standard one, and here is a metal one. All three of them have a little hole at the top for feeding thread through. We'll talk more about bobbins and winding them in a different video. The next piece we're going to talk about is a seam gauge. Seam gauges can be found in one of the bins right above the machine. So this is a seam gauge. Seam gauges are basically rulers with this little slidey piece in the middle. This is called a marker. This is what you're going to use to actually measure your seam. So seam gauges are really helpful in making sure that your seams are super uniform. You line the marker up with whatever you want your seam allowance to be. Most projects use a seam allowance of about 1/2 inch, and then you're going to take the blue edge and line it up with your fold and roll the fabric until the bottom lines up with the edge of the fabric. So at this point, you can see everything's perfectly lined up. So I'm going to pinch it and then just take a pin to hold everything in place. Seam gauges allow you to give your projects a really professional finish. We're just going to repeat this process about every 4 inches, folding it over, lining it up with the top and bottom, and then pinching it and grabbing another pin. And you can see this leaves us with a really nice and even hem. The last tool we are going to talk about is a seam ripper. Seam rippers are located in the same drawer as the seam gauges. This is an example of a seam ripper. Seam rippers can look a lot of different ways, but they all have this sharp end here and this little ball point, and in between those two pieces is a very sharp blade. Seam rippers were created to remove seams. So to hold a seam ripper, we're just going to wrap our fingers around it like this, and then we're going to take our mistake seam and take the sharp end of the seam ripper and slide it under one of the stitches, making super sure not to catch any of the fabric on accident. At this point, we're just going to push it the rest of the way through and the thread will snap. And then we'll move over 2 or 3 stitches and repeat that process again. At this point, you can kind of just pull out that little middle piece, and we're just going to continue repeating this process over and over to pull our stitches out. The other way you can use a seam ripper, in my opinion, the easier way, is to go in from the middle of the seam, which usually you have to start a little bit to do this. You again slide the pointy end under the threads and then just pull up or away to rip the threads. Certain methods do work better for certain projects, but a lot of it comes down to personal preference.